must put on a few pounds. I told you that last time.
But I have.
Skinny men are the most ridiculous thing there is.
Yorgos, I wanted to start with you, and firstly, congratulations on such an incredibly creative film, because, you know, we have this amazing triptology, and it originally started with all of the stories being interwoven potentially as one film and one narrative structure. And I was really curious about how you found the idea and kind of where you wanted to deviate into the idea of three separate stories, and especially with the idea that you would have the same incredible cast playing characters in each one of them.
I think that was mainly the idea. We started writing the script following the stories in parallel, but I kept having this thought of the same group of actors playing one character in each story. So in order to not make it too confusing, I thought that it would be a good idea to separate the three stories and show one after the other. And when we did that, we also felt that the stories themselves became stronger. Exactly because we had written them in parallel, so we were kind of looking at the connections between the scenes more. But then when they were separated, they kind of held that kind of solid structure and relation to the other stories. Not a literal one, but just more in terms of feel or atmosphere or contradiction even. Yeah.
I really love that. And Emma, for you, I mean, obviously you and Yorgos have worked together multiple times now. And I love the fact that it sounds like conversations often start with the physicality of a character. And so what was that journey in having those conversations and figuring out the physicality of your characters when it's not just one that you're developing, but you're in essence developing three characters simultaneously?
I mean, pretty much the same as before. We had a kind of shortened rehearsal process on this, which was not as physical as some of the other things that we've done. And then, yeah, I don't even know how to. I mean, what would you say to that? Do you have an answer to that? Physicality? Like, how did we work on it for this? I think it was maybe a little bit more truncated in this because we had, 3 weeks per short film. It was very different than something like Poor Things, working out that kind of arc of the character. So I don't remember. It was
a fever dream experience.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Willem, I wanted to ask you in particular about the first story, because I think it's so interesting to watch you explore all these character dynamics alongside Jesse's character. And it kind of feels like dynamics that we're used to seeing in more of a romantic setting, and yet they're existing in terms of a boss and his colleague, but there's also a parental element to it. And so how did that give you a really new space to play within, taking the idea of themes from romantic relationships, but in such a different setting?
Well, you play the scenes. It's well written. You get Jesse in front of you. And, of course, the thing that you always want to do is you want to find the shadow side of things. So if I'm being hard with him, I also want to find a way to be lovingly hard with him. And so... of course, it makes you think of kind of abusive relationships, but that's not what to play. The thing to play is to find the purpose for why you're controlling him this way. So you start to flirt with different kind of motivation. It's not a conscious thing. It's just in the actual playing. When I'm playing a scene with him, there's a tendency to not want to play things on the nose, just to give it a little space and not to just play something flat. To find, I can only call it the shadow side or the other part of it. And it's kind of intuitive. You're not saying, oh, I've got to do this. It's just when you're doing those scenes, that's the pleasure point. That's the contact. That's what I like doing.
It's wonderful. And Jesse, Yorgos has wanted to work with you for a long time, and finally your schedules lined up to do this project together. And in that discovery of Yorgos's process being less about, breaking down a scene analytically and very much about giving you the tools and the autonomy to make a lot of creative choices, how was that a new space and a new way for you in developing a character?
Yeah, I think approaching anything, it's always different. It's always a new part, a new project. but for the most part, you kind of have somewhat of a similar approach, and it's human nature, human instinct to want to understand and classify. And so I think early on I might have gotten a little bogged down in all of that. And then getting there and sort of being introduced to this environment that Yorgos creates, to this troupe of actors and brilliant just craftspeople across the board, you start to realize that this whole thing kind of operates under a different set of rules, and it's pretty intimidating in the beginning, and then becomes really exhilarating, and you try and lean into the unknown, and yeah, it feels like sort of stepping off a ledge repeatedly. And then it becomes kind of fun, stepping off the ledge, you know? Yeah.
And Margaret, not only are you developing characters within each of the stories, but you also are essentially developing twin sisters for one of the narratives. And I love the fact that you have these similarities between them, and yet they're both such different people, which is so true to life. And so how did you set about finding the connective threads between them and where you wanted them to really be individual and unique?
I never feel like I should have thought more about a character until I'm doing the Q&A. But I think what I'm saying when I say that is that in line with all the things that they're talking about and describing how specific the set is, how specific the environment is, and how specific the writing is, I do almost feel like you're going at the character from a different angle in a sense. So I think it was really informed by the movie as a whole. A lot of the heavy lifting was done for me, like, oh, if it's like that, then that's what it's like.
That actually made total sense to me.
Okay.
Joe, I've heard you say that you had really strong responses to the script when you first read it, and you've kind of talked a little bit about there's such a close space between a moment that could make you squirm or make you laugh about something. And I was interested in how you took the way that you were having these reactions and responses to just the reading of the script into the way that you wanted to play these characters.
When I read it, I guess I was just like joyfully like baffled by the whole thing. I don't know. In taking it into the characters, I don't think. Obviously, when you approach each role or project, it varies on who you're working with. And with Yorgos in particular, I didn't do a ton of overthinking. I think it feels like more like you're trying to unlearn stuff, and you want to do things instinctually. You want to be free with your body. You want to feel comfortable with the other people you're working with. And so I just kind of like, having had a kind of template from The Favourite, just turned up to rehearsal and was like, all right, let's do those games again, and see what happens. But the script, I think the thing I felt from the script was like, it's going to be very playful. I loved that it was an anthology, the 3 stories. It was like a troupe of actors changing roles. And it wasn't going to feel like going to work, even though it's like scary, because it's such a bizarre landscape. There's something sort of liberating by that bizarreness, and also simultaneously grounding by working with people that you trust. That's what I felt.
And it's such a great point that it's so liberating with kind of the tone and everything. And Mamoudou, you know, in the way that you've talked about working with Yorgos on this project, I've heard you say that part of the excitement for you and part of the draw was the opportunity to make really bold, creative choices. And so what was that experience and process like for you with that in mind?
Well, yeah, I guess it was more relinquishing any kind of fear and inhibitions, you know. I'm obviously very familiar with Yorgos' work, and I was always, I found it exhilarating, you know, but also the specificity of everything that was going on in the worlds. I just thought he was a director with a lot of integrity. And so I read the script and I was frightened, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to work with him, and I wanted to work with this group of people. And I thought if I was ever going to do anything close to this, it would be with this guy, because it would challenge me and help me grow as an actor, and I felt like it did.
So wonderful. And Willem, I wanted to ask you about the rehearsal period because everybody's kind of touched upon it a little bit. How similar or different were the exercises that Yorgos had you doing to working on Poor Things and those exercises?
There was a slightly shorter period of rehearsal for this. And the thing about this rehearsal period was it was theater games, and we really didn't concentrate so much on the text or on the character. There was no real discussion. It was really about getting in the room together, just like we're together now, and shaking each other down, getting any nerves out, being silly with each other, and then creating a complicity and an acceptance. And also, it's very useful, particularly the first time I rehearsed with. It tells you a lot about Yorgos and gives you a relationship to him and gives you a sense of the call and response between an actor and a director. It makes you comfortable. And then when you're actually doing the scenes, you're not so driven by, you're more present. You're not so driven by the result. That's sort of something for him to watch. So I guess that's an expression of trust. So it makes you feel cool, it makes you feel safe, it makes you feel a little more open-hearted and a little more open-minded, that's all. And that's quite something to accomplish in a short amount of time, but it's invaluable for when you're shooting.
I love that answer, and it's such a stunning film. It's so creative, so congratulations to all of you, and thank you for sharing it with us, and thank you for coming out to tonight's screening.
Thank you.
Thank you.